Going over our questions for Solomon. Last week we spent our time discussing Solomon, so let's see what our answers are. Good morning. All right, so first one's kind of easy. Solomon was the son of David. Solomon was a mixed bag king. There were many things he did that pleased the Lord, and then there were many things that he did that grieved the Lord. Let's talk about some of the good things. What do you know about Solomon that are some of the good things? He built the temple. That's a huge one. Yes. Okay. He asked for wisdom rather than any of the other material things that he could have asked for when God told him that he would bless him with something. He asked for wisdom. Anyone else? Okay. He wrote the Proverbs. He wrote Ecclesiastes. There's also the Song of Solomon, the love story about marriage in there. Anyone else?
I have down made a feast for all the servants.
Made a feast for all the servants. Well, it sounds like something he would do, you know? I don't know that we went over that. There may be a time, I'm trying to think, I'm racking my brain real fast about any of the stories. Not sure that that's in there. Anyone else?
Did he not start with an understanding heart so he could discern between evil and good?
Discerning heart to establish between evil and good, asking the Lord for that particular gift so that he could rule the Lord's people well. Yes. He spent a lot of time at the wedding altar. Definitely did that. I'm not sure if that's in the first part or the second part here, but yeah. So what were some of the blessings that he received from those actions that we've just discussed? What are some of the blessings that he received from that? Peace during his reign. Great wealth. He accomplished great wealth. Honor. Got lots of horses, didn't he? Some of this stuff is his own doing, not the Lord's, but yep, he did have that. So do you remember we talked about the fact that the borders of Israel extended during the time of David and Solomon more than any other time? They grew the largest during that time. He was given wisdom, and the Lord said also wealth and long life and all of that. So he was definitely blessed, yes. The glory of the Lord filled the temple. That is a wonderful story, isn't it? It's cool. If you haven't ever read it, be sure you read that and then go over to Ezekiel and watch when Ezekiel talks about the glory of the Lord filling the temple in the millennial kingdom. Those are awesome stories. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
During his reign, the nation of Israel was at its pinnacle?
It was at its pinnacle. It was the time of peace and the borders were extended and all of that was good. All right, so now let's talk about some of the things that he did that maybe displeased the Lord. What do you have on that? Okay, raise your hand. Tell me. Yeah, Patty. He what? Intermarriage, by that meaning with women outside of the nation of Israel, of linking with other nations.
And many of those foreign wives pulled them into idol worship that wasn't of God.
Absolutely. By going against God's law about intermarriage, then the women that he brought in led him down the path of idolatry. So definitely a problem there. What else do you remember? Those same horses that we just talked about. The Lord had said in Deuteronomy, do not go down into Egypt and do not multiply horses. And so he went down into Egypt and he multiplied horses, building one of the greatest stables during that time. What else?
Everything God asked him not to do.
Pretty much everything that God asked him not to do. So let's talk about what are the consequences of those actions, the things that he did that displeased the Lord. Idolatry in his kingdom. He sought to kill Jeroboam because of a prophecy. Then that's part of it. What was the prophecy? This is the consequence of his actions. His kingdom's going to be divided and torn apart, and there was going to be part of the kingdom was going to be given to one of his servants and a small portion left for his son. These are the direct consequences for the actions that Solomon took that displeased the Lord. All right, number 3, Solomon had how many wives? 700. And how many concubines? 300. Why would a king of Israel have so many women in his life? Looking for happiness, you think? After number 433, he couldn't be, still not getting it, huh? Because he could.
And carrying out into other areas, it was bringing more wealth.
Okay, so are you listening? She said bringing women into his kingdom gave him more power. Okay.
Kind of the same thing to expand his territories.
Okay, so basically during that time, the kings of the other nations would intermarry with different countries intermarrying. And the reason for that was so that you could establish some peace with those nations. So it was sort of a treaty, a pact, because if you had wives from that country and you had children from that country, there was less likely that you would be at war with that country. And so that was a very common thing to do. The problem with that is Israel wasn't supposed to be like the rest of the nations, right? It was to be separated. It was to be unique. It was to be different. And yet Solomon looked just like the other nations. Yes, Marilyn.
So do we know that he did the same, that he gave his daughters?
We don't know. Remember, I was saying last week that we only hear about like a handful of Solomon's children. They're named and they're his sons. And so with 700 wives and 300 concubines, you know there's a lot of children, but they're not named and we don't know much about them, whether he was giving them or not giving them. I don't have any idea how you would even find that out. But it's an interesting thought, isn't it? Yeah. All right, so do you think that arrangement of 1,000 women, do you think that pleased God? All right, and so, but why would, I hate to give this because that kind of gives the answer. Why would it be allowed?
He allowed it, but he wasn't pleased.
Okay, so what does that show us? It's an example of what? Free will, free choice that we have. There's lots of examples in scripture about people that do things that do not please the Lord, and yet he continues to have a relationship with them. However, the problem is that many times, if not always, there are consequences for those things that they do that don't please the Lord. And so you don't get away from that scot-free. Yes, Cheryl?
Well,
Shh, girls.
some of the punishments that God gave to him, didn't a lot of those happen after he died?
Yes. Yeah, a lot of the things happen, although Solomon lives a life that has a lot of sorrow and turmoil in it because he knows that his lifestyle does not please the Lord. And you know how we know that? Because of his writings. His writings in Ecclesiastes, his writings in Proverbs, they talk often about living a life separate and apart from the Lord and how it is devastating and how there is nothing on earth that's important if you're living that kind of a lifestyle. So we know that he lived in a lot of grief from the fractured relationship that he had with the Lord. So I think we already talked about this one. Solomon was instrumental in the writing of actually 3. I have 2 Old Testament books. Which one were they? We mentioned Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, and the Song of Solomon. And Solomon was the last king of the unified, right, of the unified or united nation of Israel. And that's going to be important as we move on to the next section. Anyone have any comments or questions?